Good morning. Good morning. How the devil are you all doing this fine day? Happy Monday. Happy Monday to you wherever you're watching, be that on Instagram, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, or anywhere else for that matter. Good morning. Good morning to Jim Turner, who is first officially off the mark. And good morning also to Dan Cullen, back at 6:45 this morning. Trust me, I wasn't awake at that point, but good morning, Dan. Hope your day pans out well. He said it was a lovely morning. Bit wet here. I don't know what it's doing with you. Having said that, I am full of the joys of spring because the mighty West Ham picked up a victory against Man United yesterday. There was a time, not too distant past, when a victory against Manchester United would have been considered a major achievement. These days, not so much. Not because West Ham are particularly marvellous, because they're certainly not. But Man United, oh, how the mighty have fallen. Very quickly, I want to give you a very quick heads up, and I will be telling you about this, reminding you throughout the week. We're doing six, count them, 6 shows this week, but we're only doing 3 next week. Allow me to explain. We've got our usual 5 back-to-back. This is the first of 5 back-to-back breakfast shows in the morning, but we've also got a Halloween show planned for 7 o'clock on Thursday night this week to celebrate Halloween. It's going to be a public performance, not by me, but a public performance of my new book called Gravedigger. You can still buy the book. I'll put the link in the chat in just a moment. But yeah, we'll be doing that on Monday night, on Thursday night rather. But then next week I'm off to Sweden with the mighty Volvo, and we'll be talking about them a bit later in the show. And I will not be here on Monday and Tuesday next week, so you'll have to forgive me for that. So I'm trying to front load, do as many shows this week as I can, because I'll be a bit short next week. And I say good morning to Garvin over at Mostly Diggers, who's just joined us. Happy Monday to you, my friend. Thank you for being here. So yes, without further ado, how about if I roll the intro, post the question of the day, and get this show on the road? I think that's about the right thing to do now. I'm going to go over to here. Good morning, Mick, who says, personally, I think the ref was biased. I saw the decision to give us the penalty. And even though it worked in our favour, I'm inclined to agree. It was what do they call it these days? A soft penalty. Should never have been. Absolutely agree. Chris Ford is here. Mark Whiting is here as well. I will press your respective buttons in just a moment. Good morning. Good morning. I get on site, no one knows anything about it. Call the agency, go home, we'll pay the day, we'll try and sort it out. Listen, I've spoken at length about the communication crisis in the industry. There's another example. Agency gives you a job, you turn up for the job, nobody knows anything about it. Now, for my mind, I don't think the agency would have made that up, because it's going to cost them money at the end of the day. So there's been a breakdown in communications. Hope you get that sorted, Footy. Keep us posted, my friend, would you? Yes, I've done the question of the day. Have I done? Yes, I have. So it is Monday. It is Monday, the 28th of October. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony, the Walrus of Demolition. In today's show, Volvo's latest short radius excavator, how Liebherr keeps mining fleets moving, Caterpillar rebuilding monster mining trucks. And we're heading back to Las Vegas for a final look at the Komatsu stand at Mine Expo. And that film, I'll warn you in advance, that film features a surprise, in fact, a shock special guest. Stand by for that. Plus, in today's morning monologue, I'm going to ask, have we made it too difficult to start a new demolition business from the ground up? I'd love to get your feelings on that. So our question of the day, which I'll remind you of in just a moment, is what is your favourite breakfast cereal. Jim Turner is going for porridge made with full-fat milk, lashings of golden syrup, the healthy option. Question there, Christopher, going for porridge as well when it's cold outside. Weetabix most days. Then again, there again, cornflakes are a great comfort food. I'll come back to my love of those in just a moment. Ken Hatter is with us. Morning, Ken. I'll press your button in a minute. And Mick says, see, the Labour Party got a new trick for those who don't agree with them, a bloody beating. I did see that. Yes. 120 odd days into Parliament, and all of a sudden, I wouldn't say necessarily suddenly, but the wheels are already falling off. Yeah, I was going to say British politics. I don't think American politics are a great deal better, to be perfectly honest. Mystery Machine. Yes, I know Dan Cullen's here early doors, but I haven't seen him in the chat so far. So somebody else may pick up a win, as they did on Friday last week. But here we go. Here is the Mystery Machine. Yeah, I think we've got 4 more of these. And I'll have a very quick count up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So Dan has got 21 points. Dan Cullen is basically uncatchable at this point. So we're just doing this for fun, I'm afraid. And here is where the fun begins. That is, believe it or not, that's a bit of machine. Not a big bit of machine, I grant you, but it is a bit of a machine. You can identify it from that. You're either a genius of some description or you've got my office bugged. As I said, we're just playing for fun today because Dan Cullen's already got the prize in the can. And I think the prize this month is going to be a JCB model, which will please him no end, I would imagine. While you're figuring that out, I am going to remind you of the question of the day because we've already had some answers on it and I'd like to discuss it a little bit more. Here we go. Yeah, my question of the day, basically perfect for a morning show. The question is quite simply, what is your favourite breakfast cereal? Now, if I find myself in a hotel and there's cereal on offer, I regularly opt for the Alpen because I like to pretend I'm having something healthy, even though I know it's absolutely full of sugar. But my personal go-to at home is cornflakes, but cornflakes 2 ways. If I'm having them in the morning, have them cold milk, no sugar. Even in the winter, cold milk, no sugar. However, if I have them in the evening because I can't be asked with a proper meal, then it's hot milk and a spoonful of sugar. But what about you? We've already had some answers on this. What do we got? What have we got here? Dan Cullen say, there's Dan. He's with us anyway. Kellogg's and then porridge and vanilla. Are we talking Kellogg's cornflakes? I guess we probably are. Ken Hatcher's going for fruit and fibre, the healthier option. So, guesses on the Mystery Machine. Jim Turner, no, hang on a minute. Dan Cullen's gone for the Hyundai 140. Jim Turner has gone for the Volvo Duck, which oddly enough, he's not a million miles away. Ken Hatter is going for the Hydromec 130. And our friend Garvin over on Mostly Diggers reckons it could be a Volvo ECR 145. It's not, but you're not a million miles away. So let me show you a bit more. I'm deliberately holding back the main machine because I think once I show you a few more bits, you'll probably get it, which would spoil the fun, basically. So keep those guesses coming in. Did I remind you of the question of the day? I think I probably did. I can't remember. Should I do it quickly anyway? Here we go. Yeah, favourite breakfast cereal. That's the question of the day. What do you got? Mick is going for porridge when I first wake up, then a fry up like I just finished. Already. Fair play to you, sir. Jim Turner is going for a Takuchi Midi Duck, and Chris Ford is going for the Volvo EWR 130E. It's not one of those. Funnily enough, Garvin over at Mostly Diggers has suggested exactly the same machine. It is not, but you are dangerously close. Here's a smidge more. There you go. That's what you're working with. Keep the guesses coming. Keep the answers to our question of the day coming in. I'm going to roll this while you're doing it. Dan Cullen going for the EC80 from Volvo. It's not one of those either. But speaking of Volvo, how about we take a look at one of their brand spanking new short radius machines. Now, if you weren't here at the very, very top of the show, just a very quick reminder, I'm going to see Volvo this time next week. Monday or Tuesday next week, I will be up in Eskilstuna in Sweden. About this time next week, I will be on a plane. So I won't be here Monday and Tuesday, but we do have 6 shows for you this week, 5 in the morning, 1 in the evening, 1 for Halloween. And I can tell you, we do have a winner. We have a winner on our mystery machine. That's what we were working with. We had plenty of guesses around the same sort of theme. Let's have a look. Chris Ford went for the EWR 130E. It's not. Volvo EC80 from Dan Cullen. It's not. Chris Ford EW 160. Nope. EC55. Nope. ECR 235 from Dan Cullen. Nope. Dan Cullen also went for the EC 140E. However, the correct answer, it's one of those. It is indeed. Chris Ford has won the day. There we are. That's what it looks like. It is, in fact, a rubber duck. It is the EWR 150. Congratulations, Chris. I've given you your 3 points. It makes no difference whatsoever to the league standings. Dan Cullen has won by a country mile this month and will be the proud recipient of a brand new JCB model. Bear with me. Let me take that off the screen quickly. Dan, that will be yours, my friend. Just to give it some perspective, there it is beside my giant noggin. It's a big old beast. Congratulations, Dan. You will be receiving that fairly soon. Dan Cullen, gracious as ever, says, well done, Chris. And Chris says, can I transfer my points to next month? Would it make a difference, Chris? That is the question. Would it make a difference? But yes, well done, Chris, and well done, Dan. I'll be doing that in the next day or two to make sure you get that before the end of the month. So, on with the show. Be back with a bit of Liebherr in a minute.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
Yeah, when we were at Mine Expo a few weeks back, in fact, it was a month ago yesterday, believe it or not, spent a lot of time with Liebherr, talking about their equipment. But you have to keep that equipment moving because that's how mining works. And this is just one of the ways that Liebherr goes about it.
Machine availability is crucial in the mining industry. Unplanned downtime can cost more than just time, particularly for machines in the most remote places. Introducing Liebherr Remote Service, bringing Liebherr expertise to you and your team when you need it most. With Liebherr Remote Service, when a machine encounters an issue, start the resolution process with Troubleshoot Advisor. This advanced diagnostic tool empowers technicians by guiding them through a step-by-step issue identification process, helping to address pressing concerns quickly. For deeper insights, the Content Delivery Portal offers extensive technical documentation at your fingertips. This comprehensive resource library ensures you have the information you need to solve complex issues more precisely than ever before. And when additional expertise is required, Expert Assist connects you with Liebherr specialists. No matter where you are, a Liebherr expert can provide real-time assistance and precise guidance through live video support and dynamic functions, ensuring you have help when you need it. Liebherr Remote Service is a suite of tools designed to streamline issue resolution and enhance operational reliability to provide immediate support for your Liebherr machines. Liebherr Remote Service reduces diagnostic time to get your machines back up and running while empowering frontline teams on the job. Enhance your troubleshooting capability and minimize downtime with Liebherr Remote Service.
Now, we've just had a comment. I must admit, this was sort of lurking in the background anyway, but I'm going to do it now. Mick says, just come up that ISG went down owing subbies 111 million. Wonder how many poor sods will be going to be out of work over this. It's actually worse than you're saying, Mick. If you bear with me 1 second, when I remember how to do this. There you are. Let me put that up. As you can see on the screen there, this is our reporting latest from, 25 minutes ago from Construction Inquirer. But as you can see, the 111 million relates purely to one arm. Just one division of ISG went down owing 111 million. Very quickly rattle through this. A finance company's house shows hundreds of contractors and suppliers owed cash by the ISG fit out, with one electrical contractor alone owed more than £20 million. The latest debts are on top of the 180 million already identified as the defunct group's other divisions. So yeah, we're actually knocking on the door of 300 million quid in debt. And also, let me just have a look at this. The total is set to grow as subcontractors fear the debt levels are grossly underestimated. One supplier has told Construction Inquirer, my name has appeared on the list, but we are owed 4 times what they're saying. It's hardly a surprise, though, that ISG has got its numbers wrong again. Yeah, that one's going to run, I'm afraid. Dan Cullen says, oh my God, how on earth did they get that deep in debt? Because they're allowed to. Because they're allowed to. The way that the system works, there you are. How the hell do these companies owe that? Because they're allowed to. You know, we have all these fancy systems for credit checks and everything else. But and I've seen this up close, and I've seen it on a very sort of small scale basis. But there is this idea of it's almost chasing your losses. So a company finds itself in dire financial straits, reaches out to some friendly suppliers and says, look, times is hard. Can we just agree that we'll do this? And then when I've paid you, we'll do the, yeah, absolutely. We'll sort you out. And that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And what you tend to find with a lot of these companies is, in order to stave off these financial reports actually hitting the airwaves, is they pay off lots and lots of little suppliers to show that they are actively paying, but the big lumps just grow and grow and grow. So, you know, I can't remember how much Carillion went down owing, 500 million, I think it was, and we've got another one now of 300 million and counting. Just an absolute disgrace. And Dan Cullen says, and a lighting company went down because of these. Yeah, and they won't be alone. They will not be alone. You think about the sheer scale of ISG and the number of divisions it had. And one we're just talking about there was purely its fit-out division. You think about all of the divisions, all of the subcontractors, all of the specialists, all of the agencies, all of the plant hirers, all of the various tiers of that supply chain, all of them will be impacted, and some of them will be fatally wounded, hit below the waterline, because basically we just have a broken system, effectively. There's nothing more than that. And why aren't they held responsible for the knock-on effect? If I owned a company or run a company, if I'm not paid on the 30th day, all work will stop. The problem with that, Dan, and I think in terms of protecting yourself, I think you're absolutely right. And listen, I run that rule as myself. If you don't pay for your last batch of advertising, your last video that we produced for you, you're not getting another one. It's as simple as that. The problem in this industry is there is always somebody that will do it cheaper and take a punt. So if you were running your own company and you said, no, stop, no, I'm not doing any more, they know full well they can go to somebody else who will do it on 60, 90 days credit terms. So they've built up exactly the same debt twice. And if that one goes tits up, they would do it again. So it's now 3 times, and so it goes on. Mick says, that's the trouble with top-tier firms. They get away with murder, too much power. One of the things I have noticed, and I don't know whether this is peculiar only to demolition, but the number of demolition contractors that I speak to now that have basically said, we are not working for tier 1 contractors anymore. We're done with it. We're out of that game. We are not going to put up with their bullshit. And I do actually think, if we actually had a trade association with some bollocks, then I think maybe you could, I wouldn't say you could necessarily fight them, but at least you could make that clear, rather than gently stroking the ego of Build UK, actually go to them and say, enough is enough. You lot are taking the piss here. You need to sort this out because you are absolutely crucifying our members. Instead of which they go along to Build UK meetings and, please use our members because it'd be lovely if you did. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. And I've said this before. I'll say it again. About 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, the Build UK set in place a new system whereby they insisted that all of their members sign up to a fair pay scheme. So they would pay all their suppliers in 30, 60 days, or whatever it might be. After a year, they surveyed all their members and they discovered that not one of their members had abided by that. Now, that's bad enough. But the head of Build UK, about a week after coming clean and saying none of our members are actually paying people fairly, was a guest speaker at an NFDC AGM, and she received not just a round of applause, she received a standing ovation. Personally, I think she should have been taken out back and given a damn good slap, but that's just me. And I'm not condoning violence against women, just so you know. Dan says they demand your invoice in every 2 weeks, yet they hold on the previous. I know a guy that's waiting 9 weeks for 3 months' invoices. And let's forget. I mean, there are some in the the bit of the business that I deal with. We have invoiced not recently, but a few months back. We invoiced a company, a major equipment manufacturer, and only when we'd gone through the process of we will do this, we will do that, we will do that. We had to sign contracts and everything else. Only when we issued the invoice did we get a response saying our payment terms are 90 days from receipt of invoice. If they'd have told us that in advance, I wouldn't have worked for them. Simple as that. But they did that. Where was I going with this? Yeah, let's not forget that you've got the last proper recession. What was that, 2008, 2009? There were major contractors, Balfour Beatty being among them, that were actually standing up at their shareholder meetings boasting about the fact that they had pushed their credit terms to 90 days. Hey, look at us. Aren't we hip and groovy? Aren't we clever? We are not paying people the money they're owed for a full 3 months. You can imagine the shareholders themselves saying, oh, well done. And Mick saying about a trade association standing up to Build UK and its members, that won't happen. You're damn right it won't. This is where construction is a joke. No subbies pulled together to stand against Tier 1, and they never tell you in advance of this 60 or 90 days. No, they don't. No, they don't. Because, I mean, funnily enough, I've had a communication this morning, and this is where I think the system is broken. Not just because of construction, although this is kind of related. I was trying to buy this flat. My parents died, left me some money. I was going to buy a flat fairly close by as an investment property, rent it out, and so on. Yeah, that I won't bore you with the details. Turns out that there is a clause within the lease on the building that you're required to pay ground rent. Well, the ground rent at the moment is 250 quid, but there is a clause in there that says they can basically double it pretty much whenever they feel like it. As a result, I mean, we were buying the thing in cash, but we had this turned up in a search from our solicitors, and the solicitor came back and said, "You'll be okay, but when you come to sell it, there's every likelihood that any mortgage lender will look at that and go, nope, too much of a risk. We're not going to do that." Now, that had been, bearing in mind, we now live in an age where if you're selling a property, you have to have a seller's pack, to prove that, the thing is sound, that you've had the heating and the ventilating and all of that checked. You have to go through that. But both the seller and the selling estate agent kept that under wraps. And that's exactly what we've got here in the payment terms of construction companies, construction equipment companies. They won't tell you until it's too late, until you're committed. Let's have a look. Mick says, miss the old days when we at times nearly hung people out the window to get paid. Yep. I know what you're saying, and I know you're doing it partly tongue-in-cheek, but why is that the case? Why are we still... bearing in mind that, how easy it is to transfer money and everything else, why do we have to have this? How much, it's one of the things that I'll mention in today's morning monologue, how much of a contractor's time now is spent chasing funds and abiding by rules and regulations, to the point where you actually have entire dedicated departments that do nothing but chase money and tick legislative boxes. How did we get there? I'm going to relate it in the monologue a bit later on. I'm going to relate it to a startup company, or the difficulty you would have in starting a company in the industry now, because it used to be a case, and as I say, I don't want to give too much of the game away, but you could set yourself up straight out of school, 16, 17, 18, go and buy yourself an old dog of a machine, start up, do a bit of subcontracting, and then maybe 6 months down the line, when you've got a bit of a reputation, take on another operator, so you can either work together or you can both work separately and earn a bit more income. Now, you'd need an accountant and a lawyer long before you got your second operator. I'll come back to that. Jim Turner says, one of my old gaffers was being dicked around by a development firm. So he had one of the lads take the 3CX down to their office when he was having a meeting about settling the bill. They tried to fob him off until he said, look out the window, and told him if he didn't get the check in the next 10, the machine was being rammed into the building. He got paid on time after that. Ridiculous that it should come to that, though, isn't it? Ridiculous that it should come to that. Ultimately, somebody has done the work. Never mind the legality and everything else. Somebody has done the work. They deserve to be paid for it. And when you think about, the company that dicked us around on the 90 days, multi-billion-pound company. You think about, the ISGs, multi-billion-pound company. Carillion, multi-billion-pound company. But they won't pay their bills on time. Disgraceful. I'll be back. Yeah, just had a message from Garvin over on Instagram. He says, anytime I see those videos where a contractor breaks up a driveway or gets a digger and pulls down the old brickwork that they did, you can feel the frustration of being taken advantage of. Yeah, I realised that some within this industry are as rough as the proverbial badger's arse, but nobody's doing that sort of thing for fun. You're doing that kind of thing. We had people, somebody drove a mini excavator through a brand spanking new hotel reception maybe 18 months ago or something like that. And you regularly see people, taking down brickwork they've erected and stuff like that. I'm not condoning it, but you can absolutely understand it. And one of the issues that I have is that I can't do that. If somebody pays me to do a video or somebody pays me to write an article, I deliver it and then invoice. So they've already got my work, and there is nothing I can do to get that back. And I can, as Garvin says, I can totally agree with that. What do we got here in the comments? Mick says, main excuse is we have to keep our shareholders happy. Me, fuck them and pay your bills. I agree. That should be on a T-shirt. Yeah. What have we got next? Caterpillar. Yeah, we've been talking a lot about rebuilding machines. And Jim Turner very kindly sent me a bunch of photographs. He was up in Humberside this weekend, I think, with a farmer who's collected some fantastic old machines. Talk about working on them as a project, as a bit of a rebuild. You'd need quite a big shed to rebuild one of these.
Oceanic Gold's been operating here at the Craic mine for over 30 years now in an open pit and as a underground operator.
We've got a team of approximately 300 people, split between about 160 in operations, about 80 in maintenance, and the remainder in support roles. We value our relationship with TerraCap. They've been a key business partner for this operation in that previous 33 years.
Their support for us is exceptional. They have a representative on site to deal with our day-to-day issues without having to send emails. We get face-to-face time with them.
The Terra guys work with me very closely to try and get our best bang for our buck. We're actively involved day-to-day in their business.
They run a fleet of 789 Cs and Ds trucks down at Craic. They also run a fleet of D10T dozers, 988s.
We'd parked up 3 of the original 789Cs that we bought in 2002. We parked them up in about 2015 and they had roughly 65 to 70,000 frame hours. And over that time, most of the parts and components had been taken off those trucks to keep the rest of the fleet going. So they're essentially sitting in our yard as scrap metal. But for the want of a bit more power, can we modify them?
We send them to the CRC centre in Christchurch, which is the rebuild centre.
The Component Rebuild Centre is a purpose-built facility primarily designed for rebuilding powertrain and hydraulic components for our customers here in New Zealand. We have a team of 15 people in the shop that cover all areas of engines and transmissions and hydraulics and complete the rebuilds from receiving of the components, strip down and inspection.
They'll strip those engines down and we should get 3 lives out of the block, and after the 3rd life we'll use a Cat reman block. We do use Cat reman cylinder heads. We use Cat reman injectors.
In mining in general in New Zealand we use a lot of Cat reman components.
The chief advantage of using the Cat reman parts and components in those rebuilds was about time. We were able to get these trucks rebuilt in a very short time frame compared with ordering a new truck.
They've had Cat reman parts from suspension cylinders right through to engines and trans. It seems to be serving the test of time so far, with the new one being on 2,000 hours so far and having no issues.
The primary things we're looking for was firstly they could get the required payload, and secondly that they could achieve speed on grade, and both of those tests were passed with flying colours.
Now they're back up and running again and to get another full life out of them. It's all Caterpillar, it all relates to each other and it's one system. That's the biggest advantage that I've dealt with them. Parts aren't getting thrown away, they get to get used again.
They'll keep working till the day they stop. They keep the earthworks moving and keep the world turning.
I had to chuckle about this comment from our friend Mick. Go, don't know what accent I hate more, Brummie, Aussie or South African? Well, they were Kiwis. But I take your point. Yeah, I do take your point. I don't have a problem with a Brummie accent. I've got some very good friends who have a Brummie accent, but the others, I can kind of agree with that. And South African does grate with me somewhat. Mick Norton says, a major player in the old major contractors group owed him £1,200 for a plant transportation task, and he was constantly fobbed off. In desperation, my mate drove his plant transporter and trailer into the major contractor's private car park and palatial office area and told them, I'm not moving until you pay up. The finance director settled up in 30 minutes. 30 minutes. So they had the ability, they just lacked the will. Dan Collins says, that's some mind. Jim Turner says, I don't mind any accent. But when folks say a statement as a question, that pisses me off no end. So that's a lot of Aussie and Americans. It's that upward lilt, isn't it? It is that upward lilt. And I don't know if anybody's seen this. You know, if you've got a garden and you've got like a wooden deck, DECK, a wooden deck, somebody has done like a a parody advert of a product to keep your deck looking nice, but they've done it with a Kiwi accent. So it's you need to repaint your dick, and it's very good. Go and find it. You'll be enormously amused. We've got one final film for you. I've already mentioned this at the top of the show. The person that introduces it, well, frankly, I'm as shocked as you're about to be. I'll be back after.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
So there I was late last night, getting myself ready to go to bed. I said goodnight to my son and heir, Fred, and he said, "Oh, I've got a video. I've just finished a video for you. Final one from Mine Expo featuring Komatsu." I said, "Oh, that's handy. I'll use that on the show tomorrow." I opened it this morning, and I discovered, much to my amusement, shock, horror, that my son Fred is actually in it. He's in it. Unheard of, absolutely unheard of. So I'm going to dredge this off of my hard drive right now, and I'll show it to you. Looks like this.
Diggers and dozers, and this is the Komatsu stand at Mine Expo 2024.
First up is the Komatsu WE2350, the biggest wheel loader in the entire world. This hybrid drive machine has a payload of more than 72,500 kilos and is designed to be matched with haulers in the 400-ton class. This bucket is an astonishing 44 cubic meters, but it's not actually the biggest bucket on the stand, because this is. The second machine on the Komatsu stand is the 930E, power agnostic mining hauler. Power agnostic means that this machine is available either in diesel configuration, as a battery fuel cell, or in trolley assist. Just as you'd expect from a Komatsu machine, it's got a fantastic cab. The third standout machine on the Komatsu stand is the PC4000-11E, all-electric face shovel. And this monster machine has a monster bucket, 22 cubic meters. In this configuration, this machine weighs more than 400 metric tons.
Yeah. So, start with Dan Cullen. Wow, what the hell? That's huge. It really, some amazing machines. They really were. Jim Turner, what's that media tart up to? I thought he was a secret media squirrel. I'm sure he will go back to being a secret media squirrel. Dan Cullen says, well, he's now on video. Well done, Fred. Thank you very much indeed. And Fred must take after his mother. He's better looking than Mark. Frankly, the back end of my dog is better looking than Mark, but thank you very much indeed for that, Chris. I'm glad you won today's mystery machine. Hope you finish last next time round, even with a head start. Right, everybody, that's going to be about it, I think. Well, not really, because I've got more. I'm going to roll the end of show stinger in just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into my morning monologue. If you can't stick around for that, please stay safe. Look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. I'll see you very, very soon. Don't forget, we've got 4 more morning shows, plus we've got one on Halloween at 7 o'clock in the evening. That's UK time, obviously. So if you have the time and the inclination, I will be back with my morning monologue immediately after this. Let me get myself ready. About 10 years ago, my wife achieved a long-held ambition. Together with an old school friend, she opened a cafe in a nearby shopping centre. Her idea was very simple: to create a place that wasn't McDonald's or Starbucks, somewhere people of all generations could meet up over pots of tea and freshly made sandwiches. But escalating rent, rising food costs, staffing issues, and worst of all, the burden of food hygiene regulations quickly turned my wife's dream into a nightmare. Now, I realise that a cafe may seem worlds away from demolition and construction, and yet we're seeing a very similar scenario playing out in our industry. Not too long ago, a young person practically fresh out of school could begin their entrepreneurial journey in demolition or construction. They'd borrow money to buy a second-hand machine. It might have been old, might have smoked a bit, and probably wasn't the most reliable. But through hard work, dedication, and determination, they could start landing jobs. At first, they'd subcontract to a larger firm, learning and earning as they went. Soon, they'd win their own contracts, building a reputation. One machine became 2, and eventually a one-man band grew into an actual demolition company. But here's where things have changed. The barriers to entry for someone wanting to start in demolition today are like those that my wife faced with her cafe a decade ago. First of all, that second-hand machine, the one that used to belch smoke on startup, well, that doesn't fly anymore. In today's world of ultra-low emission zones, older, smokier machines are no longer an option. If someone wants to start a demolition company right out of school, they're immediately saddled with debt to buy a brand new, ultra-clean machine. Speaking of all things financial, many clients now insist that their demolition contractor of choice will have enough money in the bank to see the project through all the way to completion, and that they have insurance that is equivalent to the national debt. If they overcome those obstacles, the modern world throws another challenge at them: regulations and legislation. 15 or 20 years ago, a growing demolition company's first hire was usually a second operator to help take on more or larger projects. Today, the mountain of laws covering employment, the environment, and much, much more makes the most sensible first hire someone to keep you out of court. Last week, we discussed the vast regulatory landscape facing demolition and construction companies today. Compliance has become a daunting, full-time job. So instead of focusing on work, growth, and creating jobs, a fledgling company's attention has shifted basically to avoiding breaches in legislation. And there's more. With this legal labyrinth comes the need for a legal expert on standby, an expensive necessity. They've crafted a language all their own, so only they truly understand the required documentation. Assuming you can still afford to hire an operator, you'll encounter another hurdle: industry competence training. The learn and earn model isn't acceptable anymore. Now, new hires need classroom sessions and certification. You pay hefty fees for their competence card, and only then can you teach them the practical skills of the job. A new company will likely need a website and an online presence. They outsource They outsource that at considerable cost, only to realise that their website is so complex that they can't manage it. So they have to keep paying the designer. There's likely a trade association lurking in the wings too. They'll promise that their membership will land you the hottest tender. I'll do that again. They'll promise membership will land you on the hottest tender lists, distinguish your company, and help you shape the industry for the better. But this will cost you a couple of grand a year, along with a commitment to attend pointless, introspective, navel-gazing meetings. Meanwhile, those tender lists are just as inaccessible today as they were when you were a one-man band. Now, taken individually, none of those obstacles would necessarily deter somebody from pursuing their demolition dreams. But together, they suggest that the industry isn't eager to welcome newcomers. Instead, it has built, or is allowed to be built, endless barriers to entry. When we discuss our failure to attract young people into the sector, we usually focus on individual workers fresh from school or college joining the workforce. But whether intentional or not, we've simultaneously created a system that makes true entrepreneurship nearly impossible. I think we're all familiar with the no-entry signs around demolition sites, but it now appears there are countless no-entry signs around the demolition business itself. One final thought, and I'm going to go back to the whole idea of the cafe. I don't know what your local high street looks like, but I can tell you mine has a Cafe Nero, a Costa Coffee, and a Starbucks. There are no small independent tea or coffee or cake shops or anything like that. Our high streets are now dominated by these huge, massive franchise operations that have the financial clout to effectively drive out any new startup that dares threaten their dominance. My fear now is that demolition, I was going to say is going the same way. I actually think it's gone the same way. When was the last time you heard of a new demolition company actually gaining a foothold? So, over to the chat, which has been remarkably quiet while I've been doing that. There is Dan Cullen saying he's heading back to work. Have a good day. Chat to you all on the morrow. Enjoy, Dan. Thank you very much indeed for that. How have we allowed this to be the norm? Where, when you think about those that make up the upper echelons of the demolition business in the UK, there's a couple that I know particularly well, and one of those would be Erith. Erith was started by Tom Darcy. I'm going to take a wild stab at back in the 50s or 60s. And they started basically as a haulage company. Working alongside demolition companies. And they woke up one day and thought, it's all very well hauling crap for other people, but we could do this demolition thing. So they ventured into demolition, and they grew, and they grew, and they grew. And look at them now, probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, demolition contractor in the country. Passed on to, Dave Darcy and Steve and Tony as well. And then they've grown and they've diversified and everything else. But they basically started one bloke and a truck. Could somebody do that today? Could you do that today? And going back to the notion about the machines, I realise I've been talking about ULEZ, and obviously that's related to the major conurbations, particularly London, Birmingham, Manchester. But that's pretty widespread. Nobody's going to accept a less than reliable machine, particularly one that creates a lot of smoke and could get you complaints from the local residents. So you are, before you've even turned a buck, before you've even turned a track in anger, you are going to have to go out and buy yourself, basically get yourself in hock to some quite considerable degree for either a new machine or a relatively new old machine, second-hand machine, that meets all those regulations. And then the bit that really gets my go is, as I say, back in the day, you do the work yourself, just your excavator was your office, so you do all your paperwork while you were sat in the cab, and you go home at night and you'd be bidding for work and submitting tenders and all of that kind of thing. That was your job. And then when you got to the point where I've got enough now to to pay somebody else. I'll bring somebody else on board, and they will also drive a digger, because that will either allow us to take on together bigger jobs, or he can go and do one job, I can do another job. We're now taking on more work, and then maybe another one after that. Now your first hire is probably need somebody to make sure that I'm ticking all the legislative boxes, because otherwise somebody's going to come down on me like a ton of bricks. And while I realise we have to abide by rules and regulations, and I don't actually necessarily have an issue with that, but that person that is ensuring compliance and adherence to regulations doesn't actually contribute to the bottom line of the company directly. I realise you could argue that, by keeping you out of court and making sure you don't fall foul of regulations, they make an indirect contribution. But if you are an operator and you employ another operator, as soon as that operator goes to work, he or she is generating income for the company. If, however, rather than employing that person to go and pull the levers, you employ somebody to sit behind a desk and just fill in forms all day, that's not making a contribution. In actual fact, it is sapping the revenue and the income of that fledgling company. Jim Turner says, it's no accident those rules and regs are propped up by the big businesses that are already in the group, keeping these sectors a closed group that look after themselves and squeeze the rest out. It's no different with housing developers. Yeah, listen, I'm sure it's exactly the same across the board. But when you look at how widespread it is, I mean, I started with the cafe analogy. When you look at the power of a Starbucks or a Costa Coffee or a Cafe Nero, if you're in a little independent coffee shop, your coffee is probably better than theirs. Your food is freshly made rather than arriving on a delivery van once or twice a week or whatever it might be. Your service is better because it's your business and you care that much more. You know your customers by name. You don't have to ask their name to write it on the cup in a market. You've got all of those things going for you. The one thing you lack is clout, financial clout. And that is where Starbucks and Costa Coffee and Cafe Nero and Burger King and McDonald's and Subway and Pret-a-Manger and all these places, that is where they outdo you. And when you think about the demolition business, if I were to start, I'm based in just outside Epsom. I've probably got, within 5 miles of here, I've probably got 4 or 5 demolition companies. If I were to go out and start a demolition company tomorrow, those established companies have the financial clout to ensure that I don't do any work. Plus, even if they turned a blind eye, Mark seems all right, we'll let him have a go. That's fine. He's dandy. I've still got to abide by all those rules. And my first hire is going to be somebody in the office ticking boxes, because we are a tick box industry now. Mick says, like what Jim just wrote, to me, it's still the old boys club pulling the strings. Yeah. Oh, don't you love that as a quote? Rules are for the guidance of wise men and the obedience of fools. Douglas Bader. He said that standing on one leg. Did he? How many legs did he have? I can never remember. I've got nothing against your left leg. Unfortunately, neither have you. That was Peter Cook, wasn't it? I think it was Peter Cook. Yeah. Rules are for the guidance of wise men and the obedience of fools. But we live in an age where there is no option. There is no option. And let me be absolutely clear here. I am not proposing or sanctioning bypassing of rules. But it is virtually impossible these days to be a rookie. In all parts of demolition and construction, but demolition is the bit I know best. If you are a school leaver and you fancy work in demolition, you'd think, like you could back in the day, you go down to the local demolition site and say, I could do some work. And they might say, oh, yeah, okay, we'll take you on. Just a bit of part-time work, pushing a broom, whatever it might be, fetching the tea, whatever. Sweeping the yard of the demolition company, whatever the job might be. Can't do that anymore. Yes, well, you'll have to apply in writing in triplicate, and you'll have to sit this test and that test and that test, and you'll need to get a plastic card to say that you've done all of those things. So you can't do that. And if you want to start your own company, you've looked out your window as a child at school, you've looked out your window and seen a demolition project and thought, that's it, that's the career for me, I fancy a piece of that. And you look online and you find yourself an old digger. Ask your parents or your grandparents, could you loan me 30 grand, 40 grand, whatever it might be, to go and buy my first machine? And yes, it's not the best and it does break down from time to time. But as part of it breaking down, you learn how to keep it running. So that's a learning curve in itself, which is all to the good ultimately. You can't do that anymore because the people that would be employing you will look at your machine and say, oh no, far too unreliable. And what insurance do you have? And how much money do you have in the bank? Because, if we sign up with you, we'd like to think that you've got, 4 million in the bank to make sure that you're still here when our job needs concluding. So everything is, whether you call it as an old boys club, but everything is skewed now to the bigger and more established. Now, whether that's been a deliberate move or whether that's been an indirect consequence of the way that the industry is regulated, I don't know. It doesn't actually matter whose idea this was. But we've got a system now where it's already almost impossible. And I think, when you roll forward a few years, when the already stringent legislation gets even more stringent, there will come a time when we will basically be making do with the demolition contractors that we have today, because it will be almost all but impossible for somebody new to come along and say, I want to do it in a different way or do it my own way. I mentioned this to a guy, a demolition contractor, actually, not a million miles away from where I'm sat now. And he was starting very small, but he already had some equipment and everything else. And he said, what would you do if you were starting today? And I said, I'd be looking to differentiate. So, maybe I'd go all electric and concentrate on internal demolition. Just completely differentiate myself. Don't compete with the big boys, but do something that they can't do. Do you think you could? Or do you think the system would be so skewed that you wouldn't be able to? My belief is the system would be too skewed to allow you to do so. Chris Ford says, has it always been the case of it's not what you know, but who you know in a lot of cases? The problem of being an owner-driver, people give you work because they want you. Send someone else, even if they work for you, you don't always go back. As one door closes, another opens. Don't be afraid to reinvent what you do if you're given that opportunity. Now, I mean, there are exceptions, and I would think about Chris Charlton at CJ Charlton Group. He did some subcontracted work for Johnny Mould and for Rob Collard and people like that, and he's now running his own company, and he's hired very sensibly. But it's not been easy, and it's taken a long, long while to get established to the degree that he is now. You think back, and I'm fairly sure Matt Phillips at Downwell, as an example, started one man, one machine, and he's now a multi-million-pound demolition company. Does the job properly, but also learned by doing. That's another thing that has fallen by the wayside, that learn and earn by doing. We've set up a system now where, actual on-the-job learning is all but forbidden. You need to go to a classroom and get your little bit of plastic and your little certificate. What does that actually mean? And how has that actually improved the industry? It hasn't. I say this whenever I talk about training and competence cards. If there was some indication that the presence of competence cards and all these training courses had driven down accidents and fatalities, then I put my hands up and say, look, I don't like them. I don't think they're a great system. I don't think that's a proper way to learn this particular industry. But I have to admit, they've made the industry safer. There's no indication of that whatsoever. None whatsoever. Mick says, banged off an email to NISA, which runs corner shops. I asked why there was no poppy box on display in my local. The look I got was close to me smacking the bloke in the face. Okay, so they're Asians, but why? Wonder what reply I will get from the main office. If a shop of their size will not offer the chance to buy a poppy, then it should be boycotted. More important, why does an English firm refuse to have them on show? It's a weirdly contentious that one. That I mean, when you also think, we had Indian regiments fighting alongside us, and we had Indian regiments. I can't believe that's necessarily a thing along racial lines, because we were quite literally in the, maybe not the trenches, but we were in the war together. I don't really understand how that's come to be. Gary Muirhead. Oh, the fun and games you've missed today. Morning, Gary. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Yeah, I don't know why that would be. I have to say, on the flip side of that, we've got I took Fred to squash on Sunday morning, and there's a local, I can't even remember what it's called, but there's a social club in a town not a million miles away from me, and they've literally decked out, and I'm talking like a double-fronted shop. The whole thing is just literally draped in hundreds and hundreds of poppies. They're kind of making up from your people. But yeah, very, very odd. Very, very odd. Gary, as you're arriving late, I will tell you the topic of conversation is why have we made it so difficult to start a new business in demolition and construction? And I guess this goes over into plant hire as well. You particularly operated hire. There was a time once again you could buy yourself a machine and hire yourself out, man and machine, bit like a man and a van. Could you do that today with an old donkey of a machine? Or would you kind of be required to go and buy something either new or almost new? In which case, you're basically starting your new business with a hefty debt. I mean, I'm quite fortunate. I mean, I know I've got a computer and the lighting and the cameras and all that sort of stuff. But back in the day, my job as a journalist, I needed a typewriter. My typewriter was secondhand. I needed a biro. Back in the day, it was about 10p, and a notebook, about 15p. Not a great barrier to entry in my job. Now, okay, you could say that a bit of spelling, a bit of grammar would come in handy. It did, but I could start up, for nothing. Now, you think about all the hoops you've got to jump through. And as I say, we mentioned this last week on the show, just the sheer volume of legal stuff. I almost said crap, but the legal stuff that you have to abide by in order to just get your foot in the door. Mick says, stay safe, gents. Going to listen to what Starmer has to say. No doubt more bullshit and lies. Catch you all later. Mick, he is a politician at the end of the day. You don't expect anything else, do you? Anyway, despite the fact that, Gary, you missed the Dancing Girls. You missed the free money. You missed Chris Ford with a stunning victory in today's Mystery Machine. You also missed Fred doing his first spoken on-camera spot. Yeah. The Dancing Girls and the free money, obviously that's a joke, but Chris Ford really did win the Mystery Machine, and Fred really did appear on camera. I know it sounds like I'm making it up as some sort of joke. I'm really not. You'll have to go back and watch the replay because it's a real thing. Everybody, I will be back tomorrow. I'll be back Wednesday. I'll be back Thursday twice because we've got a Halloween show, and I'll also be back on Friday as well. 2 shows missing next week, though. No Monday show, no Tuesday show, because I will be up in what looks like quite chilly Eskilstuna up in Sweden. However, I will have the warm embrace of Volvo to keep me warm, so don't worry about me too much. I'll be back tomorrow, 10 a.m. For more of the same. I'll see you then. Tatty bye.